Okay, so the short one is the one that I've been watching tonight, actually. It's called The Night Porter. And speaking of
Ooh.
female Italian directors, that's Liliana Caviani. I don't know a tremendous amount about her. I have seen her movie The Cannibals with Pierre Clementi and, of all people, Britt Eklund. It has a strong political statement. I think it's beautifully shot. I loved it. I wish it would come out on
Mhm.
Blu-ray. And I kind of think it will because it's starting to get some traction in the cult, underground again.
We
And
can help make it happen.
hell yeah, The Cannibals by Lily Economani. I think it's like Il Cannibali or something is the name of
Hmm.
it. But it's really good. And Britt Eklund proved that she could act. And I can't remember if it's dubbed into English and she does her own voice. Yeah, I guess that's it. Yeah, but Pierre Clementi doesn't. So for those not familiar, Pierre Clementi pops up in all kinds of French and Italian and European movies. Usually has this bizarre, strange urchin-like character. He's kind of like the spoiler or the villain, or just misanthropic. Sometimes he's I mean, I think the most heroic role he played was in Sweet Movie, and he was, he had a bad fate, but he was very likable. He actually played a character. Uh, he's not in this movie, but it's like a continuity, like a retcon, like a comic book would do. Uh, he was a character in the movie Battleship Potemkin, and he literally comes through time. It's not no special effects. He comes through time from the Potemkin and he comes to modern day Yugoslavia and hooks up with Anna Planeta. Do you guys know the Sweet Movie?
Haven't seen it. I remember when I was in France, that movie was on every billboard,
Wow.
and
How old were you? Like 5 or 2 or yeah?
I was 12 or 13. I
Okay, I
was
was gonna
12 and
say.
13.
I
But
always wondered if it played at the Visualite in Charlotte, but I don't. I don't think. I think Tim would know if it did. Tim said the Devils played at the Visualite in Charlotte. That's
wow.
um. So yeah, the Night Porter is an art house film, but it's also, it's not a video nasty, but it is extremely controversial. I think if it were screened in art house places like the one we have here, it would be well received, though very fights would break out. If they attempted to screen it in the, usually we have one art housey out of the 22 at my multiplex, which is literally like right down the street from me. So when I can afford to see,
Man, living the dream.
yeah, and the thing is, and that's funny theater because there's a lot of Indian people in the neighborhood. 5 screens evenings play 5 different Indian movies in without subtitles.
Oh, that's really
I
cool.
sneaked into
Yeah.
I would
both.
love to duck into that literally just for the cultural experience of being like, I don't know what's going on, but people are loving it and it's really, really
I was
awesome.
the
So
the
that's fun.
Yeah.
the one I stayed at the longest, which was only like 10 minutes. There was nobody but me, but they just keep screening them
Yeah.
because they rely on their clientele to come eventually. But if it played there, if the Night Porter played there, there'd probably be a fucking riot, like when No Less Temptation of Christ, because this movie deals with well, gosh, it's more timely than ever. It deals with Nazis and Judaism, and wow.
Oh boy.
So it has one of the most taboo love stories in cinema. But like Lolita, I would argue it's one of the most authentic and beautiful and deeply felt love stories in the history of anything cinema. I guess we're talking about Lolita. The book is more deeper than the movie, but the movie's pretty deep.
Hmm.
But uh, okay, so Charlotte Rampling, who's just very skinny, but in this movie it serves the plot. Very gorgeous though, and she comes with her husband to this hotel in Europe and for a vacation, and the bellhop. He's not really the bellhop that carries the bags. He's like the guy at the desk, played by Dirk Bogarde, who's kind of a cinematic icon to some people. I mean, I'm not knocking him. I like him. I'm not as I know a lot about his life, but haven't seen enough of his movies. I haven't seen The Accident. I've seen Victim. Those are the classic ones he did with Joseph Losey. But he was in a lot of movies, even not art house movies, even American movies. But this is his most notorious role, and I think he's incredible. So he's the, whatever of the hotel, and she recognizes him, and it's a little awkward. And then you slowly start to see through flashbacks that she was in a concentration camp. This takes place in the late 50s, by the way. So And when you think these characters were like super, super old. So she was in a concentration camp as a late teenager. And I guess you would call her pubescent, because she was developed, but supposedly not like I doubt she was 18 yet. Maybe doesn't really matter. But she was lumped in with a lot of naked Jews in this one area. I forgot what concentration camp. I still can't remember if they said it or not. In a way, it's unimportant. This movie is political and it is historical, but it's also kind of mythical and romantic. So it's archetypes to me. She's in a concentration camp because the flashbacks are shown as a fantasy, and that's going to trigger a lot of people because there's cruelty involved. Because basically, the captain of the Nazis overseeing these Jews was Derek Bogard, the hotel guy, and now he's living under a different identity. He completely just disavowed Nazism. He hates it. He's kind of fucked up in the head, and because he's got this guilt trip, which I don't blame him. If I had been a Nazi and reformed, wow, geez, how'd you live with that? So
Yeah.
but good on him. He tried to reform. He did. He reformed completely, and that's kind of the problem of the movie. Well, that's the conflict of the movie. Problem of the movie is not that this woman's married, but that they recognize each other, and how are they going to interact now? Because in the concentration camps, the people that he was in charge of were cruel somewhat to these Jews. I mean, they hosed them down, they put them in a corner naked, they checked them in, and then they don't show them torturing them or anything like that. But it's unsavory, but he took a liking specifically to this girl. And so he begins visiting her and giving her like treats and stuff, and like cake and stuff. And she probably thinks he's fattening her up to kill her, eat her, but he probably does eat her, but in a different fashion. And so he becomes obsessed with her. And actually, there is a scene where she has a wound from being tortured. They don't show the torture. And he brings her a cake, and he bends down, and very J.G. Ballard like, he kisses and slightly licks her wound. And it's so romantic to me. Maybe I'm a fucking weirdo. But the music's really pretty. There's operatic. I mean, it's got that Italians don't do irony with music. Americans are obsessed with ironic music in movies. To the Italians, putting beautiful, lovely music in gory films is not ironic. It's all a piece of art. Why not?
Yeah.
I had to learn that. That I didn't understand at first. I liked it, but I didn't understand it because I was thinking like an American. So, but
and that's the thing about like different cultures and different cinemas is that you start to notice these patterns, and it's like you'll see that it doesn't like work very well and isn't legible in one culture, but it does work extremely well in another culture. And like if an American tried to do that in a film, it would be like, oh, you're doing like this weird like fetishy thing. And like in Italian cinema, it's like that's just how it is. It just makes sense. It just works.
And the thing is, a lot of people who see movies now of my generation, not so much Chuck's, from what you've told me, you're a little older than me. People from my generation and your generation who see movies now, when they go online, a lot of them really get outraged by stuff like this. And then the Gen Y people get outraged without even knowing anything about any of it. They're just like, oh, yeah, I'm outraged. This is the wrong. Because the good thing about that is the Gen Y is learning about social justice. The bad thing is they're not learning that a lot of stuff is fiction. And it does.
Are you confusing Gen Y and Gen Z? Because it sounds like you might be confusing Gen Y and Gen Z.
Oh, Gen Z. I'm sorry. I am.
I was just like, hey.
I mixed up my chromosomes. No,
I don't even know how all that stuff parses out.
Not to hate on Gen Z because they're amazing. Like
no, I don't hate on Gen Z. But but Gen Z is very reactionary about things that in my day were liberal, and now they considered them fascistic and misogynistic, and I don't get it.
Some of it does go a little far. Some of it does definitely go a little far, and I feel like I feel like a lot of them are very, very smart, and a lot of them
Yeah.
are very think things through and all of that. But there are some who are so quick to jump on judging something before taking the time to actually understand all of the context. That's not to say that those things are automatically okay because the context is not what they think, but it's good to kind of like pause and think about it for a little bit and do
Of
some
course.
research. And
We're talking about. So imagine this movie coming out in the late 70s in Italy. We've already talked
yeah,
about Italy has political movies. So, a Nazi's the main character, and he's having had an affair with a Jewish girl in a concentration camp. So the premise in on its own is just going to shock and repulse and anger thousands of people. So this
mhm.
movie was notorious. However, it was a hit, and it is considered a classic, and it's in the Criterion Collection, and you know, I do know people who are like liberal Democrats who love it because it's an art house. It's like it's okay to love it. It's an art house
Right.
movie.
It's art
And
house, so it's okay if you love it, even if it's problematic. It's
yeah,
fine.
it is
You know,
problematic, but the thing
That's the
about it
point
is
of art is to get you to discuss things.
right. And the thing is,
yeah.
the director, a female, not a male, uh, is though not Jewish, is aware of this, and
Mhm.
the two characters themselves are aware of how insane it was that this was how her early life was, you
Yeah.
know. And to be honest, on the surface and in day-to-day life, they both seem to be living their current lives fine. And when they meet each other, that's kind of disrupted and bit by bit. It's not all at once, but what you find is at some junctures, and I think rightfully so, though this is arguable for sure. At some junctures, she's handling it better than he is because he absolutely loves her. He's fetishized her. I mean, but he deeply cares about her. I mean, it's like I've been like this with a couple of women. If you get that way with a woman and then you get it. It's just like he adores her. He would never harm her. He wants only even if she like killed him, he'd be like, "That's fine."
Oh my
I mean, it's
God.
true
You know,
love.
the kids these days, in fact, call that simping. I
Well,
know a lot of Gen Z slang because I teach Gen Z.
and they would call what he did in the concentration camps grooming. But I
Oh
mean,
God, actually. Yeah.
but my point being
Well,
is
there
when
you
they
go. When you go from a groomer to a simp, I mean, you
right.
can't say you haven't
I probably just should
changed.
stop talking about this movie. I probably lost subscribers. But seriously, no, seriously, I've always meant to review this movie. It's one of my favorite movies. It's one of my favorite romantic movies. But because the bottom line is she's handling it better than him for a while. Because like I said, he's gone kind of half crazy from guilt, and a lot of the guilt is not just that he was a Nazi, but that he had power over her. But he didn't
Mhm.
harm her. He never tortured her or harmed her. He actually shielded her from harm. However, they did have sex. And this is where you get the problematic part. There's really the real problematic part. I mean, not for me because I know it's fiction and I know psychology. Humans are capable of any kind of cognitive dissonance. This woman has cognitive dissonance when she's in the concentration camp, essentially, because she sees the cruelty around her and she sees an aggressive man. He doesn't like harm her or wound her, but he's aggressive with her romantically, and they get it on. And she begins to like that kind. She has imprinted sadomasochism, is sexually
Mhm.
imprinted on her. Which if it wasn't in this context of a concentration camp, then everybody would be like, oh well, 17-year-old girl got imprinted with sadomasochism from her boyfriend, older boyfriend. Okay, yeah, that happens every day, every 5 minutes. But I mean, he's a Nazi. um
Yeah.
but
It
the thing
really brings up that question of like, where is the ethical line here? It's like, when is that an okay and consensual and just like consensual kink thing? And when is that there is a power dynamic
Well,
here
this
and
is
this is
where
not okay
they
anymore?
cross
It's
the
like,
line.
where,
But
yeah.
the line is crossed two times. One,
Hmm.
it gets super shocking to where he asked her to dance for some him and some of his buddies. I mean, real tasteful
How are
kind
you going to
of
say no to that? It's like,
and topless, of course. And she dresses in suspenders and slacks and boots and a cap like a Nazi. and doesn't. And that's the most famous image
Ooh.
of the movie. You know,
Yeah, no, we have an edition of this in the
yeah.
house, and it's that's the cover.
Yeah, she's naked from
Wow.
here up, and she's holding her nipples. That was the poster in a lot of countries.
Yeah.
So anyway, that happens. So that's crossing the line of too far manipulation, you think. I mean, it probably was. However, I think where the line crosses is where people don't want to go, and I don't mind going. Is that it's not just that she sexually is turned on by this. That's that happens to people. It's what do you do about it? Is the fact that she genuinely loves him too.
Mm.
And the movie's kind of like a puzzle in this going between the 1950s and the 1940s to the point where you really see that it's fate. It's like these two people met in the absolute worst, horrible circumstances. It could absolutely be seen as victimizing somebody. And maybe it was, but at this point in time, uh, they love each other more than their own lives, more than anything at all. And
Mm.
that's put to the test because the Nazis find him. The escaped Nazis also living in Argentina or wherever they come in. A couple of them talk to him. They have a little talk with him, like, you better not, spill any of those secrets. He's like,
Mm.
he's like, why don't you just come with us and hang out with us? It could be like the old days. One guy even says we can resurrect the right.
Oh no.
And our man is like, no.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
wow, we got the boys from Brazil happening right
Yeah,
next
he's
door.
like,
Oh
bro,
God.
I don't want to be a Nazi.
How about we don't?
Well, then the
Yeah.
worst possible thing happens. They find out that not only did the girl in the concentration camp survive, and not only are they still involved, but she's at that very hotel. And of course she's Jewish, so they have a big problem there anyway. But they think he's going to tell her these secrets, which he's
Mhm.
not. I mean, he's tried to purge them from his memory. So he refuses to go to become part of their thing. And her husband leaves, so it's just her and him. And ultimately, the Nazis come, they start hunting them, and they end up living in a hotel room for like days and days off the food they have, gradually getting hungrier and thirstier and dirtier, uh, having a lot of sex. Yes, consensual, straight, like vanilla sex, as opposed to previously. Um, and wow. So finally they decide to brave it. And it's one of those tragic fucking endings, man. It's like they, shot down in the street. And that's it. Curtains.
Mm.
And it's like, wow. But there's just so much passion in these actors to try to make this insane scenario work. And I believe they succeed.
Mm.
Um, the only time he's rough with her in the movie is when she tries to leave when they first hole up and she tries to leave and just go out in public, and he's like, no, you can't go, they're going to kill you, which he's right, he's 100% right. But she fights him, and he like grabs her and pushes her. He doesn't slap her, but it's pretty rough. He knocks her down on the floor, and they wrestle, and then and he's trying to tell her, hey, they're going to shoot you in the head as soon as you go out the door. And finally she submits to him, and the imagery is very much like that. Her submitting
Mm.
to him down on her knees, and I mean she's clothed, but and he is too. But then of course, like a couple minutes later, they have incredible sex, and they're laughing and having fun.
Mm.
So this one's an interesting one. I'd be curious to see what you think about it, Kaylin. I'm assuming you've seen it.
Yeah.
Uh,
I definitely am
yeah,
gonna check it out because it sounds like one of those that just I'd have to like see it to know whether I
yeah,
feel like it succeeded or not. And
yeah.
like your opinion on it is interesting, and I'm really curious to see how they kind of like wrestle with all of those ideas, because stuff like that in film and in literature and in like any kind of art I find really fascinating, because I feel like you can do it very well or you can do it very
I
poorly,
mean, it's
and
like
there's zero
incest.
in between.
Yeah, it's
No
like
in between
yeah,
whatsoever.
same with
Yeah.
incest. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And I also feel like I can't be the best person to judge that because, like I'm a queer person and I'm a disabled person and like yes, I would have gotten my ass killed if I had been, in Europe at this time. It would have been very bad for me.
right.
But I'm
I
also
mean,
not like the primary demographic being targeted here.
well,
So,
if you really think about it, I mean, it is an amazing concept. And it is a romantic. Just the idea that a Nazi sees this Jewish girl in the corner and love at first sight.
yeah.
And then after he gets to know her and help her, then she's like in love with him. I mean, it's just magical. It's just the sociological context of it nowadays is considered so
Yeah.
verboten. And, you know, we're not going to get a Nazi thing, but,
Yeah. And it's
that's where
interesting because it makes me think of like all of the stuff on like the issue of consent in like
Mhm.
prison as well.
Right.
For
Yeah.
another example, it's like, can somebody who is incarcerated actually consent to having consensual sex with somebody who works at the prison, particularly a guard? And it's like it's not the same because
Yeah, but
it's not the same exact context, but it's
no,
another
no.
one that people are talking about right now contemporarily. And it's
Yeah,
like, if you
yeah.
tried to do that story with the results that you just mentioned now, I don't think it would go over well. I
There's
think
a
that there would
movie,
be massive, massive outrage.
there would.
And it's interesting.
There's a little indie movie called Condition Red, made by Aki Kaurismäki, whose brother, I forgot his first, Mika Kaurismäki is a really renowned Finnish filmmaker, but Aki never really got much of a career, but he mainly made movies in America. Condition Red stars Cinda Williams from One False Move, very attractive, in mixed race black woman, and James Russo is known for very deep, intense parts. I would say his part in Abel Ferrara's Dangerous Game is like beyond intense. He's
Hmm.
absolutely a method actor. So he's a guard, and he's someone who's been abused in his life, and he's around it all the time. He gets rough with the prisoners when he has to. He, does cop things. He doesn't kill anybody, but he notices her, and against all odds, actually, their romance is more begins consensual, really, unlike this one. I mean, to where they're immediately attracted to each other. He's the one who tries to play it off, not her, because it's like, this is my job, and I'm a fucked up guy. I can't get close to anybody. It's that trip. And by the end of the movie, not to get into the movie, but the end of the movie, she teaches them how to love. He actually says that, and it's just really
Hmm.
beautiful. But anyway,
Interesting.
another obscure oddball one, Condition Red. So that's
Cool.
the Night Porter. So what do we got next?
I guess we're back around to me at this point. So
Yay!
so I've got a giallo because of course we cannot do Italian cinema without me talking about some kind of giallo because I love them. They're
Oh
super,
yeah.
super fun. So I wanted to do one that was a little more off the beaten path. Because we've talked about Argento a lot recently, and I love Argento so much. But there's a lot of really good films out there that are really enjoyable that not everybody knows as well. So this is one that I really want to talk about. So
Can,
this film
can
came
you
out
can you
in
can continue? I'm just gonna go
yeah.
grab a visual aid real quick. You can go ahead
Yeah,
and
no,
talk.
you're good. You're good.
Go
Super
ahead.
good. Cool, cool. So I wanted to talk about The Red Queen Kills Seven Times, which came out in 1972. This one is another kind of like genre bending type of film because it's very giallo, but it's also very gothic. It incorporates elements of both into it. So you've got kind of this like typical like thriller supernatural type of deal that you see in a lot of jelly. But then you also have like this very gothic style um like visually and aesthetically, especially in this film. And this one is directed by Emilio Miraglia,
Oh
who,
yeah.
yeah, he's a little bit lesser known because his career was pretty short. All things considered, like in comparison, he's best known for this one and then another giallo that came out right before this one, the previous year, 1971, called "The Night Evelyn Came Out of the Grave." Um,
One of the greatest titles in the movie. The movie is good,
it
but
is a really good
it
title.
doesn't
Yeah.
live up to that title. It should have been a
No.
very morbid horror movie, but
Yeah.
yeah.
That one definitely could have been better. But it's interesting because it has so much going on, like just a
Have you seen that
ton.
one? You seen it?
Hmm.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
I really like Anthony Stephan anyway. He's a weird guy. But anyway,
Yeah, yeah.
good actor.
Yeah. So for Red Queen, oh,
Red
and
Queen kills 7 times. Another one of those
yes,
tongue twisters.
yes, the Red Queen kills 7 times.
I'm
Um,
intrigued just by the title.
You're
it's a
gonna tell
great
us
title,
it
right? Like both of
is.
Mhm.
these
Oh
titles are
yeah.
so good. So good.
You're gonna tell us all 7 murders, right? No, you
I am not going to tell you all 7 murders. That is a complete waste of time for a summary for this film because the murders
don't.
are honestly not the most important part.
Yeah,
So
I think the
they're
psychology.
really not.
Yeah, they're not the best murder set pieces in a Giallo,
They're really not.
but they're
They're not.
fun
They
because
are
of
fun.
the killer is
I
fun.
like I like this film because I like the premise of it and I like the character dynamics in it.
Yeah.
Not as much for, oh, I'm scared the whole time. It feels very like if you were to compare this film to like any of the Argentos that we've talked about, for example, on this channel, it's like they're not going to be as scary. You know, I watch The Spirit, I'm just like the whole entire time. This one, I'm just like, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
cool, creepy figure. The laugh is kind of spooky, I guess, but it also sounds kind of silly and over the top. Oh, that blood spurt looks so fake. Oh man, but also a little bit visceral, you know.
But they're so
um,
stylish. I mean,
it is, yeah.
you know, his aren't the best shot Giallos, but they are very well shot. Better than any
Mhm.
American exploitation movie of that time.
Yeah.
True,
You know.
true, true, true. So they are good, but you know, not maybe not the best, but still very, very fun to watch. And I do recommend both of these films.
They've got a lot of
So
traction. We'll get into that. I'll get into
yeah,
that later because I have a
yeah, yeah.
visual aid for that. Go ahead.
Oh, visual aid, fun. So, so the plot for this one is you've got this family that lives in a castle. There's two sisters named Kitty and Evelina, who fight a lot as children. They start fighting over a doll because Kitty has this beautiful blonde doll and Evelina wants to play with it, and Kitty's like, "No, it's my doll. You know, I'm very protective of her. I don't want to share." Um, and so Evelina just kind of steals this doll and like runs off and is just like, it's mine now. Like, ha, got you, sister. And they chase each other, they fight, they go into their grandfather's like study, and are still fighting over it, like running around his desk in circles. And Kenny's just like, make her stop. She always does this. It's horrible. She's so mean to me. And it's just like, my God, just like child stuff. I'm an only child, by the way.
Me
So like I
too.
see these things and I'm just like,
Yeah,
how did anybody ever put up with
I
stuff like that,
know.
man? I just, God, I'm glad I did not have to deal with it.
Me too.
Very, very glad. Uh, and all of a sudden, you know, grandfather is starting to lecture Kitty and being like, just share your doll, it's fine. And Kitty's like, but she always does this. And Evelina sees this painting that is in the grandfather's study that depicts these two figures. One is a queen wearing red, one of them is a queen wearing black. The black one has a knife, and I can't remember, it was either about to stab or has stabbed the red queen, you know, murdering their sisters as well. So she's just starts being very creepy. And I have to like just give massive kudos for good child acting at the beginning of this film because both girls are very creepy. Especially Evelina. And she's just like, oh, you know, we're these two queens and I'm going to kill her. I'm going to get my revenge. Ah. And it's just like, what the and like she takes the doll and she just starts stabbing the doll.
Dolls are very popular in Giallos.
Yes, they are.
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
they are. She just starts stabbing it and she's just like chanting and stuff. It's like it's super, super creepy. And the grandfather just has the look on his face like, what the fuck is going on? But he also knows what's going on because there is this whole entire creepy family legend based on this painting. So basically the Black Queen had been bullied by the Red Queen for a very long time and got fed up with it and decided to get revenge. But then the Red Queen decided to get revenge because she's been murdered. So every 100 years, always with a pair of sisters in this family, one of them ends up killing the other. And it's because the painting has possessed them, or like the spirit of the Red Queen has like possessed them or whatever. So later on in their life as young adults, Kitty accidentally kills Evelina. Wink to steal a little moment from Bill earlier in this session. Um, they're like physically fighting. Evelina gets pushed, falls into a river. Her head gets hit on a rock. she's bleeding. It's very bad. And their older sister, Francisca, helps Kitty cover up the accidental killing of Evelina. And the two of them tell the family that Evelina has immigrated to the United States and she's staying there and she doesn't really want to talk to anybody because she's busy living her best life in America. Cool, not suspicious at all. So then they're adults at this point. The grandfather dies very suddenly, apparently of a heart attack, but we also see this Red Queen figure come into his bedroom. And he's like seeing her and is freaking out. And so she seems to kill him, or he has a heart attack, and then she just runs off laughing very creepily and like a very over the top, not very good like sounding laugh. It just sounds silly to me. I'm just like, I don't know, it's a little cheesy, but I still love it. And this figure, Francisca says, looks like Evelina. And so this chain of murders happens because the Red Queen kills 7 people, culminating in the sister who represents the Black Queen as revenge. And so this chain of murders happens, just various people who are in some way close to the family and close to Kitty in particular, like with her work and everything. And then, well, okay, well, that's been 6 murders. I guess it's time for you to die, Kitty. So as it turns out, she goes into the basement. She opens a thing. She finds the Red Queen figure, and that is very creepy, wearing like this creepy mask that looks like super, super fake. It's like, is this supposed to be like a supernatural, like back from the dead look?
Yeah.
What is this? It looks ridiculous. It is like the worst mask I've ever seen in my entire life.
Looks so ridiculous that it goes into the absurd and then becomes creepy.
Yes.
So it sort of inadvertently works, but no.
It's really bad. It's a very, very bad mask. But it is creepy because it looks so not like a person that it's just like, oh, it's kind of weird. Don't like it. So she falls out and she's like, you know, wheezing and all of that, and apparently has been stabbed. And she says, you know, like it wasn't me or whatever. And Kitty pulls the mask off, and lo and behold, guess who's under it? It's Evelina. And as it turns out, Evelina did not, in fact, die when she hit her head on the rocks. She just got knocked out. Francisca, however, killed her for realsies in this situation after framing her for all of these murders. And it was part of this elaborate plot of basically wanting to inherit all of the family's wealth on her own and not share it with her sisters. So it's bananas, just absolutely bananas. And Francisca then traps Kitty in the basement, and has this like crazy plan of like, instead of just killing her like a normal person with like a knife or a rope or some barbed wire or whatever.
A buzzsaw, a chainsaw.
whatever convenient weapon. She's like, no, I'm going to kill her slowly by drowning her. So you see these rats just kind of, animal mention, who's keeping notes.
Bang, bang, bang.
These rats start pulling out of this hole, and then like this water starts like seeping in, and Kitty is just like climbing on top of some shelving on the wall. She's like, because the rats are creepy. And then, oh no, there's water, I'm going to die. So this is all happening. Also, during all of this, it turns out that Evelina was actually adopted. She's not biologically related to the sisters, which, shock, everyone's blonde except for her. Very obvious in retrospect. Not that that can't happen, because it can. You know, and that was basically an attempt by the grandfather to break the cycle, because he thought, oh, well, if we have an adoptive sister, then, you know, maybe like the killings won't happen. And it's like, but you still have, there's still 2 biological sisters involved. It could still happen. It really does not have any internal logic, but it is still just really fun to watch. So Francisca ends up getting killed by her husband, basically after shouting about like how useless he is and everything. And she's like, oh, and he went along with me, that idiot. And then he comes around the corner and shoots her. Cool. And Kitty ultimately is saved from drowning in the basement because of this. So there you go. She survives somehow, but the guy who comes to rescue her does not. So it's really bananas.
It is bananas.
It really is. And it's one of these where it's like, you can't really sell it well, other than just saying, just trust me. It is a really just interesting film to watch. Like again, it's not the highest quality. It's decently well shot. The visual effects are like comically bad. There were times that I was just kind of chuckling, like, this is really, really cheesy, but it's still a really fun watch. And the reason that I wanted to talk about this one is to kind of like segue into a talk about women in Giallos in general. Um, because it's one of those, you know, Henry uses the term exploitation a lot. And a lot of Jelly
So
are
does
like
Keith.
very, yeah, so does Keith, but Keith's not here. So right now it's you.
On me, baby.
So exploitation films, and there's a lot of criticism of them for that reason, but they did do something in Italian cinema at the time that was very important and was also very impactful, like, you know, globally. And it got actresses getting known for these roles. It gave them interesting characters, it gave them interesting roles, it gave them interesting dynamics that you weren't seeing in other types of films. Um, and something that I read about this when I was just kind of delving into some scholarship just on Jelly in general, you see like precursors to the final girl in American film. And you could consider Kitty a final girl because she made it to the end. You know, it's really
Yeah.
cool. And you can consider the actresses in these films some of the first screen queens, you know, and
Right, of
it's
course.
really
Yeah.
cool because it's like they were doing this decades before these
Yeah.
tropes really caught on in American cinema and in other places. And
The reason they caught on is because Sean Cunningham ripped off Mario Bava. I mean, I'm
yeah.
not gonna say homage. Bill gave us a mini tiny history. He didn't go all the way,
Hmm.
but yeah, the movie Bay of Blood or Carnage or College of Terror or
Hmm.
Twitch of the Death Nerve. I call it a Bay of Blood. Bay of Blood
Yeah.
was the first slasher movie. It is a giallo, but it is definitely a slasher movie. Sean Cunningham was part of a company that helped distribute this and drive-ins. I forgot which name he marketed it under. He was just getting started. Him when he was with Wes Craven, and they were both just getting started doing this stuff and take whatever gigs they could. So this is
Hmm.
before, I think this is like years before they made Last House on the Left. So, but
Hmm.
and they marketed it in America a few years after it came out.
Yeah.
So he uh based there's a scene in A Bay of Blood where a soothsayer, fortune teller, played by Laura Betti, a staple of Pasolini films and other Italian films. She tells a story of the deformed child, and the mother, and the child dies, and the mother seeks revenge.
Hmm.
So Sean's like, "Hey, I think I'll make a movie out of that." When
Yeah.
no could not credit anybody, and so he made Friday the 13th. But then,
Eh.
but then, when he got to the third movie, was the third movie? Maybe the second movie. It wasn't maybe a little in the first movie, but in the second movie, almost every kill is a shot for shot steal from the kills in A Bay of Blood.
Mm.
All the ones that Americans grew up with,
The Italians were doing at least 10 years before, sometimes
well, yeah,
longer
I mean,
than
like
that.
I grew up in the '80s, so we grew up with. Even though I hated gore then, and I didn't go see these movies in the theaters, I did occasionally look at Fangoria. I had friends who were into it, and the whole like spear through the two people having sex, going all the way through them and through the bed. It was
Mhm.
completely taken from A Bay of Blood. Anyway,
Yeah.
but yeah, so those definitely those elements, and the Italians just yeah. I mean it became a thing in American '80s. Once it became kind of streamlined and Americanized, and I used to hate slasher movies in American. And I think
Hmm.
most of them are probably still poorly made, but a lot of them aren't. And a lot of them are getting revisited on Blu-ray and stuff, and in the film community. And my
Yeah.
ex-wife was obsessed with them, so she
Hmm.
showed me like dozens. And then after that, I watched all the ones the Arrow was re-releasing when they would put them on streaming, like Edge of the Axe and all these crazy, obscure once obscure ones, The Burning, and uh, I like them. To me, they're fun. To me, it is like the American equivalent of the Jallos, the spaghetti westerns, the post-apocalyptic. It's a trend.
Hmm.
Like you, And the kung fu movies are kind of like this too. It became this way. I mean,
Yeah.
the kung fu movies that are outside of Shaw Brothers, I'm not saying none of them are good, but there's a ton of them. And they're turning up all over the internet, dubbed, unfortunately, still. Shaw Brothers are restored in Cantonese and Mandarin. But these are the kind of movies that I watch, like comfort movies, like these genres. All the ones
Hmm.
slashers at the bottom, but occasionally I do that. Um, and you watch a bunch of them, and just you know what to get, you're gonna get, and it's fun.
Hmm.
And then when one stands out, then that's all the better, you know.
Yeah.
And it almost becomes like you want to see them all. Now, I am not bent on seeing all American slashers. I've had many friends and girlfriends who have though. That's I think that's because in the 80s, like I said, when it was happening, I was not hip to it. And I didn't
Hmm.
think it was hip. I hated it. I thought it was vile, misogynistic. I hated
Hmm.
gore. I hated violence. But when I saw Halloween, but the thing is, my standard was Halloween. So they would show Halloween on TV here every Halloween.
Hmm.
And it was virtually uncut. And he even made a clothed version of that one scene where the girl's topless. And because it was so popular, they made a TV version, and it even has the scene at the beginning where Loomis is speaking to these people in the asylum. So that was the version I would say grew up with. I was very young when it debuted on TV less than a year before it was at the theater, which was 1978, because it made so much money. So when
Hmm.
Halloween 79 rolled around, it was on TV, and I forgot what network. It might have been syndicated, but I'm pretty sure it was one of the networks. And everybody watched it. And then the next Halloween, everybody watched it, and so on through the 80s. So I loved that movie because it wasn't as violent. And they showed Prom Night on TV. They had to cut it a little bit more, but they kept the decapitation scene. And sometimes they would be sloppy with TV. Occasionally you'd hear fuck. Occasionally you'd see some violence.
Yeah.
Once in a while you'd see a woman's nipple. And I was love it. I loved it when those things happen. By this time in the 80s, I was gradually migrating to the dark side. So you know, I know I've yielded to it. So I mean, I like American slashers, um, but I love Jowlos. There's a difference.
Yeah.
And
I feel similarly. Like I've never been super into American slashers, but as soon as I started watching Jellos, I was just like, these are awesome. Like just for whatever reason, they just tickle my brain in a way that the American like equivalent of the trend just never
well,
has.
the American slashers are lacking one thing.
Yeah.
The mystery element.
Yes, actually, that probably is it. I love the
The,
mystery element. Like I grew up reading Poirot and
yeah, Agatha
stuff like that.
Christie.
And I
Yeah, I
just
did too.
I
Yeah.
love Agatha Christie.
Agatha
And
Christie is a huge influence on Jowlos. And
yes,
the other guy is
definitely.
the German writer Edgar Wallace.
Hmm.
Those two, especially Edgar Wallace, man. Everybody, there was we talked about this on an episode. I think you were with us, you guys. I don't know if Chuck was or not, but there was a
No.
proto. It was the what is horror. So there was a
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was there for that one.
proto Giallo trend in Germany called the Krimis, Krimi,
Yeah.
short for well the word German word for criminal, and
Hmm.
they about half of the movies made were literally adapted by Edgar Wallace or him and his son or his son wrote the screenplays. And they were
Hmm.
influenced by Agatha Christie too. And Klaus Kinski was in a lot of them, and he didn't play the villain in all of them. Most of them, but
Hmm.
not all of them. And they're almost all in black and white, and they're fun. You get a chance to check them
Yeah.
out, and they're fun. They're like Giallo. They're kind of like Giallos of a different culture, of an earlier time. They're not as violent. They have violent themes, but the mystery thing is really what's paramount in them.
Yeah, I think you're
Yeah.
right. Because like with the American ones, it's like even if you don't know exactly what's going on, there's not that much of a mystery and you're not that
No,
surprised.
it's
But with the Jellos, it's
survival.
just
Yeah.
like, man, I
Yeah,
don't know what's going on until we get there. And
yeah.
sometimes that's fun. It's
Well,
like, is this a supernatural thing? Is it not a supernatural thing? I don't know. We're going to find out, and it's going to be very creepy in the meantime.
it's kind of like Scooby
Yeah.
Doo. I mean, basically, they spend
Yeah.
the movies running from the killer. Except the difference is in the slashers, they actually start killing one by one the
Yeah.
mystery machine kids. and
Yeah.
they don't kill the dog. That's in an Italian movie, but but
Oh my God.
but Scooby lives in America, but they kill them one by one, and their goal is survival, not figuring out who's the killer.
Right.
Whereas, or is the killer one of us? Sometimes usually it's not. Is Jason? He's not
Yeah.
one of the kids. He's
Right.
Yeah.
just they're
Right. But then like in a lot
stalkers.
of the Jellos, like especially like I think all of them that I've watched relatively recently or rewatched relatively recently, it's like actually, yeah, they are very compelled to figure out what the hell is happening. And
Yeah.
often that's what leads to them getting killed or barely surviving. It's just like it's that I have to know. I gotta follow this trail of breadcrumbs until I figure out
How
exactly who is murdering everybody.